Today we're going to discuss something that frustrates many English learners, feeling stuck. You know what I mean, right? That feeling when you've been studying English for months, maybe even years, but you don't feel like you're making progress. You still struggle with the same pronunciation issues, you still can't understand fast native speakers, and you still make the same grammar mistakes. If this sounds familiar, don't worry, you're not alone. In fact, this plateau, this feeling of being stuck at the same level, is completely normal in language learning. And more importantly, it's something you can overcome. In today's session, we're going to explore 6 common reasons why your English might not be improving. For each reason, I'll explain the problem, and then give you some practical solutions that you can start implementing today. Let's get started with the first reason your English might not be improving. Reason 1. You're not getting enough input. The first reason your English might not be improving is simple but critical. For example, you're not getting enough input. What do I mean by input? Input is all the English you consume, what you listen to, and what you read. Many English learners focus too much on speaking practice and grammar exercises, but they don't spend enough time simply absorbing the language. Think about how you learned your native language. Before you could speak a single word, you spent months, even years, just listening. This is how your brain naturally processes language. Research shows that to become fluent in a language, you need massive amounts of comprehensible input. That means English content that you can mostly understand, even if some words or phrases are unfamiliar. Let me give you a specific example. Many of my students tell me they study English for 1 hour a day, 3 times a week. That sounds pretty good, right? But when I ask them how much English they consume outside of those study sessions, the answer is often, not much. They might watch an English movie once a month, or occasionally read an English article online, but that's not enough. Here's the reality. 1 hour of study, 3 times a week, gives you 3 hours of English input per week. But if you want to make real progress, especially at the intermediate level, you need at least 1 hour of input per day. That's 7 hours per week, minimum. How to fix this? First, make English a part of your daily routine. Start your morning with a short English podcast while having breakfast. During your commute, listen to an English radio station or audiobook. In the evening, watch an English TV show instead of one in your native language. The key is consistency. A little bit every day is much better than a lot once a week. Second, find content that you genuinely enjoy. If you love cooking, watch English cooking videos. If you're interested in technology, read English technology blogs. When you're interested in the content, you'll be more motivated to engage with it regularly. Third, look for comprehensible input, content that's just slightly above your current level. You should understand about 80% of what you're hearing or reading. If you understand less, it might be too difficult and could lead to frustration. If you understand everything, it might be too easy and won't help you improve. Remember, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. By increasing your daily English input, you're training your brain to process the language more naturally, and this will eventually lead to improved speaking and writing skills as well. Reason 2. You're not actively engaging with the language. The second reason your English might be stagnating is that you're not actively engaging with the language. Let me explain what I mean by that. Many learners consume English content passively. They might have English radio playing in the background while they work, or they might watch English movies with subtitles in their native language. While this is better than no exposure at all, passive learning has limited benefits. Active engagement means you're mentally processing the language. You're noticing vocabulary, grammar structures, and pronunciation. You're asking questions. You're making connections. You're using the language, not just hearing it. For example, imagine you're watching an English TV show. Passive watching would be simply following the plot without paying much attention to the language. Active watching, on the other hand, might involve noticing new vocabulary, repeating interesting phrases out loud, or summarizing each episode in English after you watch it. I had a student named Carlos who complained that despite watching English movies every weekend for a year, his speaking skills hadn't improved much. When I asked him about his watching habits, I discovered that he always used Spanish subtitles and never did anything with the language he heard. He wasn't actively engaging with the English in those movies. How to fix this? First, when you're consuming English content, try to eliminate distractions. Put your phone away, close unnecessary browser tabs, and give the content your full attention, even if it's just for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Second, make notes of new words, phrases, or grammar structures you encounter. You don't need to write down everything, just the items that seem useful or interesting to you. Review these notes regularly. Third, try to use what you learn immediately. If you learn a new phrase from a podcast in the morning, try to use it in a conversation or writing exercise that same day. This repetition helps move the language from your passive to active vocabulary. Fourth, practice shadowing, repeating what you hear immediately after you hear it, mimicking the pronunciation and intonation as closely as possible. This is a powerful technique for improving your speaking fluency and accent. Finally, challenge yourself to summarize or retell content in your own words. After watching a YouTube video or reading an article, spend a few minutes explaining the main points out loud, as if you were telling a friend about it. Remember, active engagement requires more effort than passive consumption, but it leads to much faster progress. Even 20 minutes of active learning is more valuable than 2 hours of passive exposure. Reason 3. You're not getting feedback on your mistakes. Host, the third reason your English might not be improving is that you're not getting enough feedback on your mistakes. This is a common issue, especially for self-learners who don't have regular contact with teachers or native speakers. Without feedback, it's difficult to identify and correct your errors. You might be repeating the same mistakes over and over without realizing it. Over time, these mistakes can become habits that are hard to break. For example, I had a Japanese student named Yuki who had been using the phrase, "I'm agree," instead of I agree for years. No one had corrected her, so she didn't know it was incorrect. When I finally pointed this out, she was surprised because she had been confidently making this mistake in every English conversation. Another student, Miguel from Spain, had pronunciation issues with certain English vowels that made it difficult for native speakers to understand him. Because he practiced mostly alone, he wasn't aware of these issues until we started working together. How to fix this? First, find opportunities for regular feedback. This could be from a teacher, a language exchange partner, or even an online community of English learners. The key is to have someone who can point out your mistakes in a constructive way. Second, record yourself speaking English. This might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's a valuable exercise. Listen to your recordings and try to identify mistakes yourself. You might notice pronunciation issues, grammar errors, or awkward phrasing that you didn't catch while speaking. Third, use technology to your advantage. There are apps and programs that can check your writing for grammar and vocabulary errors. While they're not perfect, they can help you identify patterns of mistakes in your written English. Fourth, create a mistake journal where you record the errors you make and the corrections. Review this journal regularly to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Fifth, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Many learners avoid speaking or writing because they're worried about errors. But making mistakes is an essential part of the learning process. The more you practice, the more feedback you'll get, and the faster you'll improve. Remember, even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. By seeking regular feedback and learning from your errors, you'll break through plateaus and continue advancing in your English journey. Reason 4. You're focusing too much on grammar rules. Host, the fourth reason your English might not be improving is that you're focusing too much on grammar rules and not enough on actual communication. This is an extremely common issue, especially if you've learned English primarily in a traditional classroom setting. Don't get me wrong, grammar is important. It helps you form correct sentences and express your ideas clearly. But many English learners become obsessed with memorizing complex rules and exceptions, and they forget that the ultimate purpose of language is communication. I've worked with many students who can recite all the rules for the present perfect tense, but freeze up when they need to use it in a real conversation. They're so worried about making a mistake that they can't express themselves naturally. Ana, a student from Brazil, is a perfect example. She had studied English for 8 years and knew all the grammar rules by heart, but when she tried to speak, she was constantly pausing and correcting herself. Every sentence became a grammar exercise rather than a means of communication. As a result, conversations were stressful for her, and she wasn't making progress in her fluency. How to fix this? First, shift your mindset from perfect grammar to effective communication. Remember that even with some grammar mistakes, you can still express your ideas and be understood. The most important thing is getting your message across. Second, Practice using the grammar you already know in real-life situations. Instead of completing another worksheet on the third conditional, try using conditional sentences in a conversation or writing a story that requires them. Third, learn grammar in context. Instead of memorizing isolated rules, notice how grammar structures are used in the content you consume. When you read a book or listen to a podcast, pay attention to how tenses, articles, and prepositions are used naturally. Fourth, focus on the grammar points that are most relevant to your goals. If you're learning English for business, the grammar needed for formal emails and presentations might be your priority. If you're learning for travel, conversational grammar and questions might be more important. Finally, be patient with yourself. Grammar accuracy develops over time through a combination of study and practical use. Don't expect to master every rule at once. Remember, many successful English speakers make occasional grammar mistakes but can communicate effectively. Native speakers usually care much more about whether they can understand you than whether your grammar is perfect. By focusing on communication first and grammar second, you'll likely find that both areas improve more quickly. Your learning method doesn't match your learning style. The fifth reason your English might not be improving is that your learning method doesn't match your learning style. We all process and retain information differently, and what works well for one person might not work for another. For example, if you're a visual learner, someone who learns best through seeing, but you're trying to improve your English primarily through audio podcasts, you might not be making the progress you could be. Similarly, if you're a kinesthetic learner, someone who learns through physical activities and movement, sitting still with a textbook for hours might not be the most effective approach for you. I had a student named Thomas who was frustrated because he wasn't retaining vocabulary despite using flashcard apps daily. When we explored different learning strategies, we discovered that he remembered words much better when he associated them with images or when he acted them out physically. Once he adapted his study method to include more visual and kinesthetic elements, his vocabulary retention improved dramatically. How to fix this? First, take some time to identify your learning preferences. Do you remember information better when you see it, hear it, or do something with it? Do you prefer studying alone or with others? Do you like structured lessons or more flexible, exploratory learning? There are many online quizzes that can help you determine your learning style, but simple self-reflection can be just as effective. Second, diversify your learning methods to engage different senses and parts of your brain. Even if you have a dominant learning style, most people benefit from a mixed approach. For example, visual learners might benefit from videos with subtitles, infographics, mind maps, and written materials with color coding or highlighting. Auditory learners might prefer podcasts, audio lessons, reading aloud, discussing topics with others, and songs in English. Kinesthetic learners might find success with role-playing, games, physical movement while studying, using flashcards they can manipulate, and real-life tasks in English. Third, experiment with different resources and techniques, and pay attention to which ones help you learn and retain information best. Don't be afraid to abandon methods that aren't working for you, even if they're popular or recommended by others. Fourth, consider your environment and timing. Some people learn better in quiet spaces, while others prefer background noise. Some are most alert in the morning, while others focus better in the evening. Try studying at different times and in different places to find what works best for you. Remember, there's no right way to learn English. The best method is the one that works for you and that you enjoy enough to stick with consistently. By aligning your learning approach with your natural preferences, you'll likely see faster progress and experience less frustration. Reason 6. You're not using English in meaningful contexts. The sixth and final reason your English might not be improving is that you're not using the language in meaningful contexts. Language is ultimately a tool for communication, and like any tool, it's best learned through genuine use. Many English learners study vocabulary lists, complete grammar exercises, and maybe practice speaking with other learners. But they rarely use English for actual communication purposes, to express real thoughts, solve real problems, or connect with real people. This disconnect between study and application can significantly slow down your progress. Research in language acquisition consistently shows that we learn languages most effectively when we use them for authentic communication. I had a student named Louisa who had been studying English diligently for years but felt she wasn't making progress. Her vocabulary was impressive and her grammar knowledge was solid, but she struggled with fluency and confidence. When I asked about her English use outside of class, she admitted that she rarely used English, except for her weekly lessons. Together, we found ways for her to use English in her everyday life. Joining an online book club, writing a blog about her hobbies, and finding an English-speaking friend to chat with regularly. Within a few months, her fluency and confidence improved dramatically, even though she wasn't studying any new grammar or vocabulary. How to fix this? First, find opportunities to use English for real communication. This could be joining online communities related to your interests, participating in language exchange programs, or finding native speakers to practice with through apps or websites designed for this purpose. Second, pursue your hobbies and interests in English. If you love cooking, follow English recipes. If you enjoy gaming, play games in English, or join English-speaking gaming communities. By connecting the language to activities you already enjoy, you'll be more motivated to use it regularly. Third, set meaningful goals for your English use. Instead of saying, "I want to improve my speaking," try setting a goal like, "I want to give a 5-minute presentation on my favorite hobby," or "I want to have a 30-minute conversation about current events without major communication breakdowns." Fourth, use English to solve real problems. Try getting technical support in English, following instructions for assembling furniture, or reading reviews to decide which product to buy. These practical applications create stronger neural connections than abstract study. Fifth, Create an English zone in your life where you commit to using only English. This could be a specific time each day, a particular activity, or even a physical space in your home where you switch to English mode. Remember, language learning is not just about accumulating knowledge. It's about developing a skill. And like any skill, from playing the piano to playing basketball, it improves most quickly through regular, meaningful practice. So there you have it. 6 common reasons why your English might not be improving and practical solutions for each one. Let's quickly recap what we've covered. 1. You're not getting enough input. Increase your daily exposure to English through reading, listening, and watching content you enjoy. 2. You're not actively engaging with the language. Move from passive consumption to active processing by noticing language patterns, taking notes, and using what you learn. 3. You're not getting feedback on your mistakes. Find opportunities for correction through teachers, language partners, or technology to avoid fossilizing errors. 4. You're focusing too much on grammar rules. Shift your priority from perfect grammar to effective communication and learn grammar in context rather than in isolation. 5. Your learning method doesn't match your learning style. Identify how you learn best and adapt your study approach accordingly using a variety of resources that engage different senses. 6. You're not using English in meaningful contexts. Create opportunities to use English for real communication and authentic purposes in your daily life. If you're feeling stuck in your English journey, I encourage you to honestly evaluate which of these reasons might be affecting your progress. You don't need to address all 6 areas at once. Even making changes in 1 or 2 areas can lead to significant improvement. Remember, language learning is not a straight line. There will be plateaus where you feel like you're not making progress, and that's completely normal. The key is to stay consistent, be patient with yourself, and keep finding joy in the learning process. Thank you for joining me for this English practice session. I hope you found it helpful and that you're leaving with some practical ideas to implement in your language learning routine. If you have any questions or would like more specific advice, please leave a comment below. Until next time, happy learning. Remember, every day is an opportunity to improve your English, even if it's just a little bit. Those small steps add up to big progress over time.